children, I'll tell you the news. Don't worry about the names or dates, you already know it's true. Your doctor hates your baby, the prime minister's a ghost, and all them folks are sailing here 'cause they're in love with boats. Superfoods can save us from all our evil sin. JFK and Elvis own a bar in Wisconsin. And vaccinations were created by the CIA to steal votes from Bernie Sanders and turn your babies gay. So click the link you think you'd like and get tooled for a fight against those lefty fascist communists who are leaning too far right.
Hi and welcome to Not Another Fake Newscast. I'm Paul.
And I'm Jerry, and we're here today with the Athletic's Kieran Devlin. Kieran is a sports writer, previously was at the Times, I believe, Kieran, and you've been with the Athletic for a wee while, is that right?
No, sorry, I was a freelance. I haven't done stuff for the Times before.
Right, okay, sorry, that's where I've got mixed up then. So you were a freelance writer then, so that's interesting. That's even a completely different perspective then on your journalism career. So how firstly did you kind of get into journalism?
Well, I guess just first off, I've been very fortunate in my life, been very privileged. So I went to private school, which obviously has a whole world of privilege attached to it and opens doors otherwise a lot less fortunate people couldn't have been gone to. But when I graduated from university, I worked in recruitment. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I worked in recruitment, hated it, but I managed to save a lot of money from it because as much as I think it's a fairly awful line of work that absolutely destroys your mental health. There was a lot of money to be made from it. Eventually, I worked in a university just as like an administrator, just doing like general admin stuff, and then I saved up a lot of money and went back to university then in London to study a journalism masters. But all the way through that, when I was working in the university in recruitment, I was doing freelance writing, mostly music.
Okay.
So it was initially pro bono, but I started to get paid by places like Vice and Dazed, the Guardian, the Independent, and then football writing. It was mostly that was all pro bono at the start. It was for this. It's a Celtic fan podcast and website called the 90 Minute Cynic.
Oh yeah.
Where I did stuff for them, and that's how like the Athletic came across me. And then thankfully, I was coming to the end of my journalism degree. I'd had a decent, amount of stuff in music and culture to like a portfolio and stuff before that. I managed to, through a lot of luck, they discovered my portfolio and stuff I'd done beforehand, and I managed to weasel my way into a pretty dream job, really.
I mean, so I'm assuming it's fair to say you're a Celtic supporter, judging by that tends to be the focus of your writing, and you've worked for the Celtic podcast.
Yeah, yeah, a Celtic supporter. Not all of us support the teams we're covering.
Yeah,
there's more than a few who support the team that's their rival.
Right, okay.
I won't disclose any names, but yeah, I'm quite lucky that I'm covering the team I support.
Well, yeah, that is a dream job then. So, in terms of the music journalism you did, like, was it reviews? Was it like live? Were you going to gigs? What kind of stuff were you doing?
So it was mostly album reviews at the start, but then it's something, I guess, because I was just trying to enter writing from a DIY thing. I had no professional training or anything at that point, so I was just writing for blogs and everything. And then you start off with album reviews, but then you get more confident, I guess. And I think everyone's on a similar path. And you say, right, I want to do an artist interview now, or I want to do a festival review or anything.
Yeah.
And it's got to progress along there. And then you start for blogs where you're paid nothing. Before you start feeling confident enough to pitch to editors, broadsheets, or a bit more high-profile websites who do actually pay the writers.
Yeah.
And I imagine, listening to you guys, it's a similar thing. It's not exclusive to music journalism. This is a thing that's fairly representative across lots of things, and I've seen it. Like actually, the first place I was commissioned wasn't about music; it was a politics article for Prospect magazine. I did.
Right.
So I think it seems to, as you guys well know, it seems to be a fairly common, widespread if you're trying to enter writing, from a grassroots equivalent level, if that, to use a football analogy for journalism.
Well, yeah, it's one of the things that we've certainly discussed it before, that it's one of the blocks, if you will, for getting into writing properly, that like you said, you had saved up a pile of money when you were doing stuff, and then and you had a job when you were going through and starting out, and those, essentially, there's a lot of starting out writing. There's a lot of starting out with a lot of the stuff in media where, like, you're expected to work for nothing or for so little that it's not a viable thing to, like, essentially you can't wake up on a Tuesday and say, well, that's it, I'm a writer now, and then suddenly the money's going to be flooding in. So a lot of people have suggested to us in the past that, yeah, like, one of the biggest stumbling blocks is being able to have some kind of financial support in some form or another, be it your own job or be it, you're at university and you're getting, that type of thing.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that, I was working for 3 years while I was writing and everything, and it's that time where you try writing at a desk, and then I had my line manager pulling me up for trying to do like journalism stuff at my desk before, and I think it is really hard. And again, I've been very lucky in lots of things, but the fact I did have that money saved up that I could afford, because I never felt, even though I had a few regular freelance stuff, it was never enough that I could think, right, I can go freelance now. I can leave my job and do writing full time.
Yeah.
I was never in that position. I always thought, like, going back to university to do a master's in it or another degree would be my best route into it. And thankfully, I had the money saved there. But I think a lot of people, some of the best writers I know have, and I've got a lot of friends who've done this, who they were doing. They had a full-time job elsewhere, and they were just so talented, and that they managed to make that route where they could, either go straight into a full-time position as a journalist, or they could go full-time freelance. And it's a very difficult line to tread.
Yeah.
For a lot of positions, particularly for music, which is absolutely which is died a death, really. I think I'll let you get there. Just a quick anecdote to try and point out how ridiculously, like, what's the word I'm trying to, like obdurate, like, just difficult music journalism is now. Is that I had a few weeks work experience with Music Week, the sort of like industry magazine for the music industry.
Yeah.
The business to business, and there was like, they'd seen my portfolio before that, the stuff I'd written for broadsheets and big websites and everything.
Yeah.
And I was saying, like, no one will hire me without a degree for a permanent position. And then they were like, why? They're like, they just walked into all their jobs at Melody Maker and NME, all these like heritage music magazines.
Yeah.
They just strolled into it because they posted an album review to them, and then they got given like their dream job, 30 grand a week salary in the 90s.
Yeah.
To take drugs with rock stars, and it's just like, I mean, they just don't understand how like difficult it is to get.
The music industry's changed massively since then, though, right? I mean, we were talking to the La Fontaines, a local Scottish band, last week, and we were kind of making a comparison between the music scene 20-25 years ago, and the money that surrounded it and stuff as well compared to now. It's a completely different industry. So did you get to interview anyone cool or go to a particularly interesting gig as part of your career?
I think it's still probably, but hopefully my editors don't hear this, but my favorite article I've still written was this one I did about like the rise of wellness culture and its intersection with pop music.
Right. Okay.
So like the proliferation of gong baths and everything like that. And I interviewed Ryuichi Sakamoto, It's this Japanese guy who's widely credited with basically inventing modern electronic music as we know it, along with Georgie Amador.
Right. Okay.
And he's just like, I just worship the guy, and everything he said was just like insanely poetic. Like, it was a 15-minute Skype interview, and compared to like spending half a day with someone, and it was just mind blowing how everything said just had such pathos, and it's like being like it was like being told the meaning of life just chatting to this guy, and
but you were totally fanboying.
Yeah, it was really hard to try and remain professional. Like I was trying to put on this professional, this demeanor when I was trying to, because like he just released this album about he just had survived cancer at the time. There was a big, and it was reminiscent of the tsunami that happened in Japan.
Right.
And it was all about like the closeness between life and death and everything. And he was just so relaxed about death basically.
Yeah.
And then he made this. So the point I was trying to loosen into is just in a way the rise of wellness and for generations ahead and millennials and everything that, and the way it's come into music. You see like sober raves now, and there's such a massive decline in drinking and drug taking among young people that there's this weird sort of fatalism linked in with wellness culture that I just find really fascinating, and the way it's just in inflected culture and music, I just find really curious, and he just absolutely nailed it. Sorry, I've been. I know he said I'd go for a tangent, but I thought this is
no, that's cool, man. It's interesting.
No, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
That's the best thing about getting someone on the show is, it can go in a direction that you totally didn't expect it to, and it's an interesting insight to see that that you started in such a different kind of sphere of journalism, and you've ended up being like essentially a full-time sports writer now. Do you do any other like writing aside from the sports stuff at the moment, or?
Yeah, so I've done. I do fairly regular stuff for Men's Fitness on mental health.
Yeah.
So I had a recent article with them about Parkrun. This organization every Saturday at 9 o'clock. Around the world, people meet and basically just it's a 5K run, but it's about the sense of like community that is fostered, and it's really helped with people with loneliness, with finding a sense of structure to their week. I interviewed quite a few people who were either suffering from depression or there was one guy whose brother had committed suicide, and then 2 days later he was at Parkrun, and it was the first time he told me it was like the first time he could feel anything again. And he helped a girl who was beside him get her personal best, and it felt like something constructive. And I feel like this isn't a thing specific to Parkrun. There's obviously lots of different institutions, lots of different organisations who are offering these activities, but I just think it's just a net positive to society that there's this thing in place. If you forget, the whole stuff about, mental health benefits of exercise and stuff like that, and just focus on the community aspects and the social aspects, I think it's really interesting. I still do some music stuff on the side with for DJ Mag. I've done quite a lot of stuff about the music industry, how exploitative organizations like Spotify are, for instance.
Yeah.
And focusing on like how unsubsidized artists and songwriters still are compared to a lot of the major label companies, and how they're just manipulating everything. I've got a thing coming out in a few weeks, which has been working on for a good few months, about the new immigration law that's coming in at the start of January, about how artists and bands and DJs from the EU, they need like DIY venues and like very small nightclubs to stump up an extra 200 quid for their visas. And it's like, unless you're like a big band or a big DJ going to a big venue, no one can afford that. So it's very depressing. Think about how
it's going to be super detrimental to the arts and culture scene of the UK if but I mean, again, this is a problem. It's been quite prominent in the news in the last week or so, due to the sort of funding, the lack of funding in comparison to most of the kind of major European states off the back of COVID, to try and make sure that, you know, arts facilities and bands and orchestras and all this theatre keeps going. You know, traditionally, the Conservative governments tend to be the ones who underfund the arts the most. And, you know, when you're talking about how parkrun can bring people together and can foster a sense of community, art and culture and music is just as important for stuff like that. Yeah.
Interesting. I was going to say, just on the back of what you were saying about the immigration, one of the touring bands that I'm quite friendly with, one of the other things that they brought up, and it's kind of in the same grounds as the tour and stuff, is something that people maybe don't even fully know is, so now when you're taking merchandise across to the EU and vice versa, you're essentially having to pay duty on it on the way out, like before you even sold anything, because you're taking a product from the UK into the EU and vice versa. So you have to pay tax on the product that you're essentially exporting in your van before you sell any of it. And then they're now very concerned at the fact, much the same as they having to get hold of visas, that once they get over here or once they go over there, they now have all this stock that they've already paid the tax on, but they've no shifted any stock yet, and just other variables like that.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it's the same with vinyl as well. Like, there's so many vinyl plants in like Holland and Germany that it's going to be like, if you're like an indie artist, it's just not worth your money getting your album printed on vinyl anymore. Like, it's just, unless you price it extremely high. Like, there's some really good organizations like Bandcamp. They do, you know, they every month they have a Bandcamp day where 100% they don't take a single penny from their usual cut for, you know, for bands that are selling any of their merchandise, any of their albums or discographies, whatever. Then, you know, they're very good anyway in terms of properly remunerating artists. But, you know, it's such a great incentive doing this every month or so. Yeah, but yeah, it's like, as I was saying, like, there's just all these little things that you just know for a fact that the Tory ministers who designed this policy haven't put a single moment's thought into. Stuff like the merchandise and getting the van, stuff like the vinyl exporting, all this stuff. I mean, it's just mad, and you just their disrespect to the arts, as you say, this is something that's just been, it's entrenched, it's historic, and the fact that there was no, like, before this week, like, what's happened is great. Like, this incoming, this should have happened 4 months ago.
Yeah.
Before thousands of people have lost their jobs, before hundreds of venues have closed. Like, it's too late. It's too late that this has happened.
But it's so reactionary as well, you know.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's not even just small venues. I mean, we spoke about it speaking to the Fonts, but they're shutting down theatres. They're shutting down like homes of orchestras in the UK, like things that you would even imagine in the Venn diagram of Tories that care about the arts and the arts that the Tories might care about, where that intersection is. Even those areas have I mean, I've had to get rid of 40 members of staff or 50 members of staff because they now can't keep their doors open, and things that are national institutions that are 400 years old and stuff like that now can't be open anymore. It's a bizarre time to be in.
Yeah, it's almost at the extent where this is, after 10 years, austerity is finally catching up on their interests. It's like for so long they've just offloaded it to Labour councils, you know, to disabled people, to single mothers, to people of colour, and now it's finally saying, "Oh no, it's well, like, I can't go see this local production of Hamilton this weekend because their staff are furloughed." Oh, well, what are we gonna do? We're gonna have to invest. You know, if this is what triggers like a series of like Keynesian investment, then it's just gonna be bizarre.
It's starting to affect their voters and stuff as well. You know, with a level of kind of unemployment, with the impending recession that we're all going to see, all of a sudden, all this stuff actually starts to affect people who vote for that party. I mean, I've found it quite odd over the last few months, seeing some of the outcry over some of the, things which people in our local area have kind of taken for granted for the past 10 years. Seemingly all of these people were completely unaware of. I find it bizarre that we all live in the same country at times, but it is what it is. So we've got quite political quite early, and I was kind of mentioning reactionary politics and stuff like that we seem to see from our government at the moment. Like if there's an element of public pressure, then suddenly they respond to that. So given that we're on that subject, the Marcus Rashford obviously made quite a large impact on the government recently. Managed to get him backtracking a policy which is potentially more than any Labour government has done, or opposition has done recently.
He's actually the best opposition leader that we've seen in the last 10 years, possibly.
But do you think then that politics has a place in sport and a place in football?
Absolutely, and I think Marcus Rashford has done more than anyone to prove that, but not just necessarily in sport. Just if you're a major public figure, you have a platform that you can use for good, and he's made it clear that anyone of similar wealth and any similar power with a similarly sized platform, they have no excuses if they consider themselves progressive, if they consider themselves invested in an equal society, a better society. They have no excuse not to try at least to emulate what Rashford has done here, because they know they can lobby this seriously.
Yeah.
But I think what was so impressive about Rashford was just how sober he was, just how calm, collected, eloquent. I know for myself, when the condescension he was receiving from some Tory MPs,
yeah,
I was just losing my shit. I have no idea how he managed to stay so composed. But it's a genuinely incredible achievement, and individual awards are a bit of a weird one, and stuff like sports personality of the award. It's a bit of a copterized nonsense, but at the same time, if anyone deserves it, he deserves it for what he's done.
Well, that's it. At the start of the COVID stuff as well, one of the Neville brothers, was it one or
Gary?
Gary, he owns the hotels, and he was giving out the hotels to the hospital staff and stuff as well, essentially. Well, with a reduced rate, if not free. Do you know what I mean? But the point is, he was also, again, another person who has all this wealth and is demonstrating there's no reason not to be socially aware. Just because you are known as a sports personality doesn't mean that you can't use your platform for good. I mean, that's what it boils down to, using your platform for good when you know something is ethically correct.
Yeah, and we are quick to criticise footballers a lot of the time for some of their more ridiculous behaviour and extravagance and stuff. So you need to give them credit when they do something like this,
I think that through this crisis, and with the Black Lives Matter movement as well, you look at players like Jadon Sancho, like Rashford. There was a number of American internationals in the Bundesliga who, they've been very open about it, and when they've been asked about it, they've also spoke very eloquently about it. And these are very young guys who have spent most of their young lives being vilified, as lots of footballers historically have, particularly footballers, minority footballers who are always, as you guys are well aware, always find some form of demonisation in certain quarters of the British media and internationally as well. I really hope there's no more condescension after this because of what Rashford's done, what people like Sancho have done with the Black Lives Matter. These guys are way more socially conscious than they're ever given credit for. Speaking to them when I can, the vast majority of them are really level-headed, really grounded. A lot of their charity work just unpublicised, and they like it that way. Even Scottish guys like Stephen Naismith and Enda Robson give so much to charity themselves, like genuinely, like massive chunks of their pay packets.
Yeah.
I feel like I really hope at some point we just have a reckoning with like footballers. Okay, they're paid obscene amounts of money, but lots of them also give us massive chunks of that money back into the communities from which they came from.
Yeah.
You look at stuff. It's similar. It's similar. Going back to music as well. Like it's what Rashford has done is very analogous to what Stormzy has been doing with his Oxbridge scholarships and stuff like that. These guys are doing way more than, for example, the bankers, who Boris Johnson asked us to clap for last week. How many CEOs of hedge funds have used their wealth or power in a similar way, but who's always the one that the Conservatives reach to as this proxy villain that we can use to beat them over the heads with. I remember when Matt Hancock, made that announcement, vilifying footballers and saying they should always take a pay cut. It was he did that 2 days after the banks had announced they'd paid their bonuses early in anticipation of the shortfall because of lockdown.
Yeah,
So,
where was the criticism of that?
Yeah, even other celebrities, like, I mean, the two different groups of celebrities. You've got your classic celebrities, and then you've got your TV celebrities. I'm trying to find a lovely way to put that, but essentially, your reality TV
Reality
shows.
TV stars.
Yeah. But these people manage to escape, for the most part, not all of them, granted, but a lot of them bring it upon themselves, but they manage to escape kind of the same level of criticism, even though in the grand scheme of things, from how much money that they're making and for the age that they are and stuff, they're, for all intents and purposes, very similar to a lot of these young boys that are playing football. Yet the young football players who buy a new shiny Ferrari gets absolutely slated in, say, the Daily Mail for buying a new shiny Ferrari, but every person on the Only Way Is Essex or an equivalent programme like that are all driving about in this same price Range Rovers, do you know what I mean? And nobody ever slates them for it.
I perceive it slightly differently. I think that our media likes to kind of shame both of those sections of society significantly, rather than shaming business leaders, CEOs, bankers, etc. And I think there's a class element to that a lot of the time. I think it's easy to vilify young working class people who, maybe haven't had the benefit of a fantastic education, maybe don't speak necessarily as eloquently as some of these business leaders. But, when you see someone like Rashford who's very clearly kept in touch with his community, has decided to take a stand to look after it. I think there's a lot to be admired in that. And I also think that, as you were saying, I think we can all learn a little bit from the approach that he took in his kind of Twitter spats with prominent Tory MPs online. He essentially, by reacting calmly, by being measured and talking through things without anger or insult, he essentially shamed. I can't remember the woman's name; it's not coming to me, but he shamed her into apologising. And I do think we can all learn a bit from that. So going back to politics and football, we've seen obviously Black Lives Matter. We've seen things like Marcus Rashford getting involved. UEFA tend to take a stance that politics doesn't belong in football a lot of the time, and we've seen this we've seen this specifically with Celtic fans being censured, for example, for showing support for the Palestinians when they were playing an Israeli team, etc. So do you think that there's an element of hypocrisy where UEFA are happy to play politics when it suits them, and do you think that perhaps this is something which needs to be kind of overruled, and we need to accept a bit more politics in our football?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a very clear double standard, and I think with the Athletic, there was a good article a couple of weeks back. Why are football crowds so white? And tied into it was like a response to the Black Lives Matter movement, where it was written by 3 of our black members of staff. And the thing they were going into was not just UEFA, but you look at what Sky Sports are doing, and a number of broadcasters and even the Premier League as well, it just comes across. It's uncomfortably performative. A lot of this stuff. It doesn't. It like the thing they keep coming back to is when the players are taking a knee, the commentators are saying, "Look how powerful this image is," and you're like, "It doesn't." Like when you look how powerful this image is, with like loads of advertising in the background, with a white commentator telling us how powerful it is, it sort of nullifies it a bit, and it does sort of, it highlights that there's no real substance to this. And the thing that's coming with so many really, this is another thing. That was actually just a few hours ago. Was at the Akinfenwa, the sort of like a really sort of famous guy, footballer who's plodded around the lower leagues in England, but he's always been renowned as a really sort of articulate, very vocal, a very charismatic guy. And he had a post where his point is, none of this matters. Like the kneeling stuff at the end of the day doesn't really matter without education, without actual like policy set in place that is going to materially affect things. Because it just comes back to material change. All of this is just gesture without something substantial behind it.
Yeah.
And this is the thing with UEFA at the same time. I mean, you look at earlier today, Eric Dyer was charged with 4 games for going into the crowds to confront someone that was harassing his family. That's a shorter charge than people have had for racism. Like it's incredible. Like just the double standards that UEFA are erecting, both with the Black Lives Matter thing and just widely. As you say, there have been there's stuff with the Palestinian flags in the past. There's there's wider stuff. You can talk about the Celtic IRA stuff. Whether you think that's a bad thing or not. It's a bit much more murkier waters. But I feel like the sort of the Palestinian freedom thing is a very clear cut. It's a human rights issue. It's something that Amnesty International have like huge operations with. There's like one of the most legitimate human rights charities in the world, and it does feel like they're just erecting double standards when they see fit. But you look at UEFA almost like a comically evil organization at the best of times.
Yeah.
And as our FIFA, there's the fact they're just like, yeah, we'll give the World Cup to
Qatar.
Yeah, it's just we're just like literally whoever has the most money as possible. Have slaves and kill your own people, behead people. It doesn't matter as long as we've got. I can buy an extra Virgin Island somewhere.
Yeah. As long as they're putting money in their pockets.
But the other thing that you mentioned was when you were talking about them taking a knee and stuff like that, and it's like a white commentator talking about how powerful it is. There is a lack of representation in football at anything above the being on the park side. So essentially, management and commentators and not quite as much coaches, but essentially coaches and pretty much all the other roles in football that aren't. I mean, if you look at the English Premier League, especially the amount of black players across the board that exist, and there's loads. There's a large portion of a noticeable percentage. But yet, when you look into anything above the being on the park, there is very little. I'm not saying there's none. I know people will start shouting and moaning, start listing random commentators and random managers, but in the grand scheme of things, there's very little representation in those areas.
I think it's been interesting as well. Sorry to cut you off there, Kieran, but it's been interesting as well the past month or so since the Black Lives Matter movement kind of became very prominent. That suddenly, from my point of view anyway, I believe that there has been a certain amount of tokenism in terms of the punditry and the people that they've brought on. Suddenly there's been a lot more people of colour involved in that side of things because again they've kind of been shamed into it and embarrassed. But it is. As you say, it's not real change. It doesn't represent real change. It's performative. It's not doing anything to address the kind of structural racism that exists in the country. So how do you think that the kind of football setup in the UK can get past that?
I think the best thing is positive discrimination. I think it is just getting people into these positions of power. And the fact is, obviously the most common argument we've always heard about positive discrimination is that it should only go to the people who deserve the job. But the fact is, there's so many talented black coaches out there. Just this afternoon, I spoke to Brian Deane, the former Leeds United and Sheffield United striker, Brian Deane, who did all his coaching badges. It wasn't about this, but I was looking up his coaching record, and he'd done his full UEFA Pro license coaching badges, and then he'd got a job at Sarpsborg, who's in the top flight of Norway, and he did a really good job there. He's really highly rated, and he left the Common Consent in 2014, and he hasn't managed a team since. And I'd like, okay, there's maybe some underlying reason I haven't managed to surface in my research of the guy.
Yeah.
But it just strikes me as really odd that, a team after that record in 2014, a team in the English Championship or English League One or somewhere hasn't
given him a chance.
Given a chance.
When you see
Scotland, Scotland, probably very similar to what you were just about to say, Jerry. If you look at some of the management in Scotland and for first time in the Premier League in England, there's a lot of garbage managers that are out there. So
just utter mediocrity, who just seem to be able to roll from club to club, despite underperforming everywhere they go, showing no tactical awareness. I would say particularly English managers in England that you see this happening to quite often, like Alan Pardew, David Moyes even, David Moyes keeps picking up quite high profile jobs, despite being an abject failure at every job he's had since Everton, really. It's a strange one.
I think a big tell, I was actually discussing this a few weeks ago. I think a big tell for this, for the next few years will be, you look at Frank Lampard. He's worked hard. He's got his coaching badges. He did a good job with Derby, but then after one semi-decent season in the Championship, he was given one of the top 6 jobs in England. Admittedly, he had prior connections with them.
Yeah,
but I think a big telling thing is you could see a similar thing with Gerrard and Rangers, in that he done his coaching badges. Fair enough. A lot of people respect him as a coach. Rangers has a massive job, and similarly to Chelsea, it does feel like for someone's first job that wouldn't happen for a black manager who had the same profile.
Yeah.
For example, I think a very telling thing is Ashley Cole, who is just as eloquent as those guys, was just as highly rated within England, is just as respected as a player and a person, has done his coaching badges and everything, is trying to make it as a manager. Will he be given the same opportunities? Because his profile is exactly the same as Lampard and Gerrard, except for he's black and they're white. So I think it'll be very interesting. It's almost like a litmus test for British football in the next few years, and how they respect Ashley Cole compared to those guys.
Yeah, and I suppose we're coming into an era now where there has. I mean, I don't know if it's just perception, and I would need to have a look at the stats and stuff, but it seems to me as if there has been more and more people of colour playing in the English Premiership at a high level who are now coming in, through their career, or coming out the other end into coaching and management. So if anything, more than ever, we should now be seeing them stepping up into coaching and management roles. So yeah, as you say, it'll be interesting to see if that does happen or not. I mean, the other major thing that's happened to sport recently, obviously, is the thing that's happening to all of us. It's the COVID pandemic. So it's affected different countries and different leagues in different ways. Scotland, in particular, we chose to end our league early and chose not to kind of end our season to quite a lot of vitriol from certain aspects. Certain aspects of the fan base of Scottish football. Even personally, as a Celtic supporter, I would I would have quite liked to have seen the season finished and to have seen Celtic, win it by completing every game, so that there was no whataboutery, there was no talk of asterisks next to the 9 in a row, etc.
Oh,
Do you think
a half, as I understand it from it's been made clear that that's where people stand.
Do you think that the SPFL and the SFA got it right?
I don't know. I feel really mixed up in this, because I feel Scottish football is coming back too soon. And just today, it was. I know Scotland, especially compared to England, it's done very well and it's ahead of schedule than what many of us thought, just as a country. But today, I got a press release from the SFA saying they're reducing testing to once a week, and that just seems so reckless.
Yeah.
At this moment in time.
Yes, the scientists have been saying in the last week that it's airborne, and obviously the impact of that, like if they get it wrong with just one player, like there's like 22 of them in a park breathing quite heavily and running about, and like essentially the chances of one person being there and actually being able to infect an entire park, like I think about how devastating that would be for especially one of the smaller teams in the league if like all 11 players now have COVID and the opposing team they're playing 11 players with COVID. That's two teams that now don't exist for 3 weeks at a time or 4 weeks at a time and that's providing everyone comes out the other side healthy. You know what I mean? Like it's a very dangerous game to be playing.
Do you think it's business and money that's driving these decisions? Do you think it's a desperation to try and get money through the door, essentially?
Yeah, I think business to one extent. I think it's also just club survival. I think a lot of them. I think one thing that one area they were considering was just basically suspending football for a year for the lower leagues. It's particularly League One and League Two in Scotland. The people are just saying, should we have a shortened season? Should we scrap the season altogether? Loads of people think should just scrap it, because the lower leagues can't exist without getting fans through the door. That's their lifeblood. Like they get some stuff from ads and stuff like that, but they get no TV money. They get very little commercial income. It's all about gate receipts.
But then, what happens to the players who are on the books of those clubs in that instance?
I think, because the vast majority of them, they're all part time. I think it's just they'd have to find out otherwise. Like it's just like it's just an incredibly difficult situation where you're picking the lesser two evils. Otherwise, the club goes extinct.
Well, the thing is, though, and you've actually hit on it when you were saying that it matters to them how many people they're getting through the gate matters to whether or not they survive or not. And if you then start having to impose social distancing type guidelines in a stadium, you then get the scenario where even though they're open and playing and now actually generating cost in doing so, you're only generating a percentage of the income that you're usually relying on, because you just can't have that many people in the stadium. So, and then you're essentially operating at a loss to be open, to have them there. You're not generating enough money to even cover your cost. And then that just becomes, you're just watching the money fade away as you play football until there's nothing left. Like, it would be a horrible situation.
Yeah, it's really bleak. As you say, you have to pay for stewards, you have to pay for all these operating costs,
catering, and everything. Like the players on the park and all the management and all the extra people who come in the cost on the day.
I think sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just got to say, like from an aesthetic point of view, even I don't know how much of the English League you've watched since it's came back. I mean, I was desperately missing football, but have been largely massively underwhelmed by the kind of quality of the product on show when I've been watching the English Premiership games, and obviously the lack of atmosphere and not having fans and stuff has an impact on that. But do you think there's also maybe an element of you're seeing it with fresh eyes and you're actually seeing that it's not necessarily all it's cracked up to be down south?
Yeah, maybe. I think the big thing. I think that I've been enjoying it, but I was just so starved for ages. I remember watching. I can't remember. I think it was Dortmund Mönchengladbach, I want to say, was the first game back.
Yeah.
And that was it was initially surreal, but I started to really enjoy it just as from a footballing level, because I think the big thing for me was that there was that rush you get when there's a chance, when there's a chance created, a guy finds a bit of space, there's a through ball, there's like that rush you get from watching a game. You hadn't felt it in 3 months, and it just felt so novel and great to have that again. I just like, okay, yeah, it's not as good without the fans, but I'll still watch 3 games a day if it's on. It's like I think
maybe I've just chosen really bad games to watch. Maybe that's what the problem is.
Yeah, just stick to. Actually, Man United have actually been really good to watch since they've come back. Which is very odd.
They seem to have benefited from the break, certainly.
Yeah, well, they've just got class. They're just playing class players in their positions. Like, there's no real. There doesn't seem to be anything like sort of coherent or very nuanced tactical thing to it. They've just said, let's play Pogba and Fernandes and Martial and Greenwood and everything. But it's paying off. I think the big thing. Sorry, you're going to say?
I was only going to say, it's just getting their money's worth. They've had them sitting not doing anything for 3 months. They're just like, who's costing us the most money? Get them out there. Get them generating income for the TV.
What I think's interesting in what we're seeing in England and elsewhere and coming into Scotland, that I think, obviously, Scottish football is already an environment where the big two, the disparity between them and everyone else is really, really pronounced. Yeah. For a variety of reasons, it's going to get more pronounced in the next few months and year. Firstly, because of the financial reasons, Celtic and Rangers will be able to sell more virtual season tickets. Today, they've announced that Sky have allowed the SPFL for clubs to sell pay-per-view as well, which is massive and will be, particularly for Celtic and Rangers, a massive money maker.
Actually, it allows them to make more money potentially than they've ever been able to bring in. Yeah,
especially since because, specifically Celtic, because they haven't even added any value like the MyJers thing, because they are just demanding full price for a streaming service. Yeah. To give that their proper value, they'll have to charge people full price for a pay-per-view thing. So how the average ticket at Parkhead might be 25 quid to 30 quid or whatever. You're probably going to have to pay that for a stream. Otherwise, there's no point in being a virtual season ticket holder, because everyone else is just basically they can stream individual games for cheaper, which doesn't make any financial sense.
So what I've been struggling to get my head around with Celtic specifically, and I don't want to like hone in on Celtic too much, but as a supporter, I'm struggling to understand, like, are they doing away with Celtic TV entirely for the duration of this? Because obviously up until now, I lived in the Middle East for 5 years and had a subscription to Celtic TV, watched it there for like, I don't know, it was maybe £20 a month tops for Celtic TV. So, are people abroad still going to be able to do that? And if so, what's stopping me as someone who lives in the UK? Not that I would ever do this or that I would encourage anyone to, but just getting a VPN.
I just run a VPN to Dubai and just picking up the ticket.
Yeah. So Celtic TV is functioning normally for people outside the UK. They can still watch all the games and everything like that. They're using a different service altogether for the virtual season tickets. It's this company called Stream Digital, who are based in Falkirk, I think. And I found this really interesting. Like, I'm not sure if you've tried to stream, if it's tried to illegally stream a Celtic game from last season.
No.
No, I haven't.
But so they've introduced this anti-piracy software that's part of the streaming software itself, that basically makes it illegal to illegally stream it, and it also recognizes VPNs, so you won't be able to do it. So it's very advanced, and just no VPN works on it. I've definitely not tried this whatsoever.
I mean, my background is IT. I'd have imagined that in this scenario that you would just use like the logic would be that there's a two-stage encryption. So unless your app has to decrypt the code, and unless you're running the app to decrypt the code that's coming in, they wouldn't be like, you know what I mean? So unless you're using their app, you wouldn't be, the signal is just going to be a gargled mess that's coming in because their proprietary software will be doing the decryption. I mean, I'm guessing that's how it works for the most part. They just have to be a bit more clever and a bit higher end. But what I'm actually more curious about it, so see with their deal with Sky, so is that them streaming? So are they streaming only the games that are at Parkhead? So essentially the question I'm getting to here is there a chance for like Motherwell, for example, to get a boon playing against Celtic because everybody's going to be paying the Motherwell's, like, you know what I mean, that everybody's going to be paying because it's a Fir Park?
Yeah,
right, okay, yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah,
I think so. I think that would be especially the case. And so, like, if Sky don't have the rights to that game, people will pay pay-per-view for Motherwell service. I think that's probably how it's going to work. Which could be a brilliant way to generate money for the teams outside the big two.
and level the playing field a little bit because actually they'll be able to bring in potentially more money from ticket sales than they are in a normal Celtic Motherwell match, especially because there's going to, you presume there's going to be a lot of interest in this season specifically due to the potentially historical nature of it.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the case. There's actually on that, which I think is quite interesting, which will definitely be applicable for both Celtic and Rangers, is when you look at England and in Germany and in Italy and in Spain, the best teams are winning with more regularity. The teams with the deeper squads, the better sides, because in many ways, as I'm sure you noticed, it just feels like 11 guys playing against 11 guys on a pitch. Like the whole spectacle and the whole mystique of football has been stripped back, and it is just very basic. It's like going down to the park, like the whole melodrama of it isn't there anymore. So it is just when it comes down to it, it is the better team will win more because there isn't the sense of like a really imposing atmosphere or like the home ground intimidating thing. It's all been peeled away. And another, sorry, just very quickly, another thing that was announced today, IFAB, who make the football's laws, they've announced the 5 subs rule that was introduced initially for the leagues that are in post-lockdown will extend to next season as well, which is only going to help. It's only going to help the more moneyed teams with better squads as well.
Yeah, with more talent on the bench, I suppose. Yeah, and actually, the kind of home crowd thing can potentially work against you. If there's a lot of pressure on the team, we saw it towards the end of last season. Rangers were struggling at Ibrox a lot of the time because things weren't going particularly well for them. The fans were on their back, and it was actually working against them to be at home. With the level of pressure potentially coming up this season in Scottish football, it might potentially benefit Celtic to not have that atmosphere where people are getting nervous and stressed if they're not winning, 60 minutes into a match or whatever. That can filter across to the players. So psychologically, like you say, it becomes 11 versus 11. And if you have the most expensive players, the players who are trained the most and who have the best sort of nutrition, everything else, then that's the team that should essentially be winning.
I'll also be interested, and this is a weird thing that I'm going to keep you when we're talking about it, but it'll be interesting to see it from, the only way I can describe it is a cinematic point of view, right? So see lesser clubs who don't quite have the investment of really fancy fly cams over the top of their stadium. Like, I mean, it's essentially like if you're at like the Emirates, they've got all the money forever. Do you know what I mean? So like they've got all the cameras that are all everywhere and, cameras on wires and all sorts. If you then go to somewhere like Falkirk, do you know what I mean? Like the what you're going to be seeing and the way you're going to be seeing it is going to be very different. And there's going to be, logically for me, from the point of view of like, from a media point of view, there'll be a lot more focus on that because you've got a lot more time and a lot more, like, I mean, that is your only product at that point. So the product you're putting out suddenly now matters, that you've got £1 million worth of cameras as opposed to 15 grand's worth of cameras. You know what I mean? So there's going to be a noticeable disparity between where you're watching the game. Do you know what I mean? And who it is that you're watching. Just a thought.
No, yeah, I hadn't actually thought of that, but that is a really interesting point. And I'm not sure if any Scottish Championship teams have signed up yet. I actually need to follow up because I've been meaning to follow this up for a few weeks now since the Sky deal was initially the revised Sky deal was eventually announced. But I think as you say, it is going to be very stripped back, bare to bones. But a lot of these clubs have been using Stream Digital as their like in-house streaming provider for just their fan TV. Like Aberdeen, Hearts, and Hibs and Celtic had them already in place, so they already have the cameras operational and they already have them, present. What I think will be interesting is how they're operated in comparison to traditional broadcasters. Because obviously there's such a regimented way of doing it, and like professional cameramen. Whereas unless they hire specialists, there's clubs without like their own fan TV. Like a Ross County or something. Like, how are they like? Are they going to operate the cameras? It's going to be quite entertaining to see.
To see the quality of coverage we're getting.
A couple of lads with DSLRs just running along the side of the pitch.
A poor guy they've just got in contract or something.
Yeah, just figure out how to use that. So, talking a little bit about the Athletic, which is where you're working now. For any of our listeners who are interested in football specifically, I only read football stuff on the Athletic. Do you cover other sports?
We discussed this today because we weren't actually 100% sure if there was other sports covered.
We cover mostly. On the UK side, we have some amount of boxing.
Right.
Apart from that, we've got loads of American sports like NFL, NBA, hockey, baseball, MMA. And then they've got an entire section for fantasy football in the US because they're absolutely
mad for it.
Yeah.
Is it a model that's been exported from the US then?
Yeah, so it was founded a few years ago in the US. Now I can't remember which city. It wasn't LA initially, or San Francisco, but it was initially in the US, and it just became like it was just as an idea. It started after the 2019 Champions League final, so it developed very quickly from when they decided they wanted to start this thing in the UK to launch over about 2.5 months.
Right. Well, I'm personally a subscriber. I think the quality of sports journalism on there is very high. Especially a lot of the feature writing and stuff, which is done, is particularly interesting. I've read some really good articles on there. I would recommend our listeners kind of give it a go. I think you can get like a free month, can't you, to figure out how you feel about it, whether you want to continue a subscription. So it's worth having a look at. But is it a model which is it generating a decent amount of income for the Athletic in the UK? Do you know?
Yeah. So the thing was, this is in the public. We had layoffs a few weeks ago, but they were all in the US, right. And the UK is performing the best at the moment, because like everything was going. They were miles ahead of where they wanted to be before COVID happened. And obviously, when there's no sports, it does. Very few people were subscribing when there's no like news relevant articles. Like, it's fine doing retrospectives as much as you want, but at the same time, that doesn't compel people to subscribe and to read all the time. I think, like, obviously, understandably, there's some big critics of the Athletic and everything like that. My big issue is when people criticize the model, because if a subscription-based model doesn't work, then I don't know what the alternative is. Because we had a couple of layoffs because of the COVID thing, but look at the layoffs at some brilliant companies that are based around ad revenue. Like, you look at
BuzzFeed.
With BuzzFeed. Do you guys know the US website Outline?
No, I don't.
Phenomenal,
to be honest.
phenomenal like culture and politics. That was really attuned. That is the only website I've ever read that really understood internet culture and in the internet's like impact on society and politics and everything. And that was just shut down because ad revenue has just fallen off a cliff since COVID happened. And it's got the thing where there's so many talented writers, and most of them just have to turn to freelancing because there's so few staff jobs now. Because no one, unless you do turn to clickbait, and it's. I don't want to denounce like clickbait thing because people have to make a living, people have to make money. For most places, there's some publications I reserve it. It's much. I'd much rather you much rather working a shitty desk job than working for some publications. And I've had a few shitty desk jobs. But at the same time, like this sounds quite sanctimonious, but I do honestly believe that if you want really decent journalism, the only way to get it now is to subsidize it, is to actually pay for it, because ads, like, you can't make a decent thing off ad revenue anymore. You can't. It's unsustainable unless you have massive sort of funding from sort of seedy quarters, which has been the case for quite a few. There's a few like really weird right-wing websites in the UK that have that for very shady funding, that have no readers and no adverts, but still manage to survive somehow.
Yeah, and zero transparency a lot of the time about where that money comes from.
I mean, there's a few large, well-known news establishments in the UK that have questionable funding from various places as well. It's not reserved to the websites, but me and Jerry were actually talking about this today, and kind of I've been stuck thinking about it since we discussed it, which is, so you've got subscriptions for certain newspapers and stuff like that for their online content and stuff. Now, there's an argument to say that in the nicest possible way, a lot of these big newspapers probably produce about 15 or 20% of stuff that I actually care about, and there's lots of other junk in the nicest possible way, but there's a lot of stuff that's just not me and doesn't.
Or just
stuff that's not me. Yeah.
Your interest, yeah.
And there is an argument to say that in the event, even the big name papers took more focused approach on various sections. So say we'll just use a big name paper of stuff, like, so say we use like the Telegraph or something. If the Telegraph went Telegraph Politics with this subscription-based service where they were paying for good quality politics writers who were writing there, and they were looking for that
Telegraph or something.
Yeah. I know. I was just using one of the big, well-established papers. Do you know what I mean? But there is an argument to say, based on the model that you guys use, that logically moving forward, it might be a worthwhile thing in media across the board for like news outlets and journalists to be in focused spheres of subscription based on that sphere, rather than broadsheet type stuff that's covered with everything that just doesn't really, they're asking for money, but in the grand scheme of things, maybe doesn't appeal to the great.
There's an argument that we're kind of using a dated model and trying to push it into the new sort of ecosystem which we inhabit now, and perhaps the future of journalism, if we want it to kind of remain with a decent level of independence, not be beholden to advertisers, and to be able to kind of take genuine stances on stuff which isn't all about upsetting the people who are funding us, then perhaps subscription-based, more specialised models, that could be the future of news, politics, journalism, be it sport, be it music, be it politics, be it whatever. That perhaps that's something we need to consider as an option. And certainly, it's something that when paywalls began, your automatic reaction is, well, why did it pay? Because people weren't paying for it before, But certainly, having had a subscription to The Athletic for this past year or so, I can see the benefit of the quality of the journalism that's being pushed out of that business. So it's something that I want to consume, and if I want to continue to consume it, I think also as well having people focused on the specific teams, a lot of content being generated for the team that you support. It's probably something which has always been available to maybe a Celtic supporter, but for other teams who are less popular and stuff, it's
there's very few Hamilton Accies reporters that are just focusing on Accies. You know what I mean?
But they're going to get a bit more content, a bit more quality content than they're used to. Perhaps, I think that's fair, Kieran.
Yeah, and I think it's also from like a job enjoyment perspective. Like I think the big thing, as a lot of these guys that come from local papers, and the big criticism of the Athletic has been that they've been nitpicking local papers, like the good sports writers from local papers, and leaving local papers to dry or whatever. And that's valid. That's absolutely fair. What I'd say from these guys' perspectives have come in, a lot of them have come from local papers that are now owned by Reach, and they had to do 5 stories a day, where most of them are transfer rumours, where they called agents. Like one of them was telling me, he was asked to write the story on a player, and he called up a few agents and he found out it was bullshit. He went to his editor, said, "This is bullshit," and says, "Write the story anyway." And like
because the readers will lap it up.
Yeah, and because they need to do their quota for 5 stories a day, and they've come in and they love it from a job like enjoyment perspective. It's just life and day from what they do, and as I say, Reach have their model. That's absolutely fine. I'm not going to cast aspersions on them. But it's just from the guys that have come in, it just makes that this is like what they imagined what football journalism is can be when and obviously we're all really fortunate to have these jobs, but hopefully it sort of it breeds something a bit more, and other rivals can step up, and there's this idea, this sort of re-energizing of what football journalism can be.
Well, the thing is, it's not even just football journalism. I think that that principle can actually be applied across the board. If you look at, again, not to cast any dispersions on anybody, but if you look at some of the newspapers and how much, in the nicest possible way, junk they have to produce every day because they have to be putting up 1 million articles. So, and then, if you can imagine, and you almost certainly can, but if our listeners can imagine what it's like to have to find the story, essentially, regardless of what your field speciality is. If you have to find, we go back to politics again, if you have to find 5 stories or 6 stories in politics every day, you're eventually just pulling any old garbage, and as long as the headline gets the click, that gets the advert revenue, then it doesn't really matter. And then that not only destroys the quality of the journalism, but it destroys the quality of journalism as a whole. Do you know what I mean? Because suddenly people lose interest in what it is journalists have got to say because they're just churning out crap.
Yeah, and you look at and specifically in the UK, the trust in political journalism has just fallen off a cliff.
Yeah.
But since Brexit and then since the 2019 election, it's at an all-time low, and it's becoming very polarised. And as a result, you could say what you want about the BBC. It badly needs reform. Some of its staff make no. They don't hide their political allegiances too well. But in theory, it should be a phenomenal public service. Has historically been a phenomenal public service. It just needs reform, and we're at risk of it becoming this very polarised, atomized thing now. And I think stuff like the New Statesman, how they've erected a paywall the last couple of years. It seems to be doing okay. I have a few friends that freelance for them, but none of them are staffers there. I think so much of it depends on luck. So much it depends on the market. And as you say, because people are so invested in football, and in particular their football team, it's a bit different asking people for updates about lobby and social housing schemes and everything like that stuff that's like important, but you're not going to you're not going to pay 30 quid a year to.
Unless you're a real political geek.
Nobody's got their social housing scheme poster on their wall in their bedroom. Do you know what I mean? Like,
but yeah, the polarisation is a problem. I think also like political journalism, in my opinion, it has suffered a little from a lack of solidarity across the board between journalists. So, for example, we've got ourselves in a situation whereby Boris Johnson and his government can just choose to not interact with certain media outlets if they feel they're being critical of them. Now, obviously, we sitting here all know that it's fucking journalists' job to be critical of politicians. That's what they're there for. They're there to hold them to account. If we had a situation whereby political media across the board were prepared to take a stand and say, well, no, we're not having this. If you're not going to speak to Channel 4 or Good Morning Britain or whoever it may be because they've criticised you quite fairly, then you're not speaking to us either. We're not going to continue to push out the message that you want us to push out. Unfortunately, we're in a position where that isn't the case. I think that has a lot to do with funding models and stuff as well. The quality of journalism is going downhill because publications are becoming more and more cash strapped. Newsrooms are becoming, the staff is becoming smaller. There's more and more pressure on people to still produce the same amount of content, and the quality of content is going down. So yeah.
I think another thing with it, like one of my friends, she's a local reporter in London, and she was saying she signed up to this mentorship program, whereas like an older journalist like mentored her. An older journalist was a politics reporter at the Mail, and right. She tried to like introduce this just absolute like properly cutthroat idea of just getting exclusives and getting this or that. That's you can visibly see is very endemic in political journalism, and especially in London and Westminster journalism. That is, it just prioritizes getting all these scoops and this scoop centrism and getting all these like leaked emails and letters seen, and then you publish all this stuff, and it's all about like, oh yeah, great stories on getting this, and there's no consider, and it's what comes back to. I think it was with the vote on the Brexit bill, like last November, I want to say last October, that they called it a Super Saturday. Like it was, like it was. It's all theatre. It's all there for consumption rather than something that has material consequence for tens of millions of people. There's this disconnect between what political journalism sees itself as, which is all about getting scoops and patting each other on the back for getting, finding out this politician's been sleeping with someone underage or whatever, and what it should be, which is holding people to account and relaying, they've completely forgotten, not to get, again, sanctimonious, but they've forgotten the fundamental public duty of journalism to inform the public and to hold the government to account. That's the point of journalism, not to like sort of move around between far right blogs into new media companies, like it's a merry-go-round, just because you have really good contacts that feed you stories all the time.
You've got Super Saturday was regurgitated there on Saturday for the pubs reopening, and you had respected newspapers using pictures of like Boris and like his cabinet standing pouring pints, talking about how great it is, and like at no point were the news articles just like, maybe we shouldn't be trying to get people to go drinking. Like at no point were they like, maybe there is a weird reliance on alcoholism in this country that we should be addressing. But instead it was just like, do you know what's happening Saturday, guys? We're all going to get pissed. Like it's just because that sells papers, or that gets clicks. But unfortunately, there was no journalism there from the point of view that, like I said, like no one was questioning the ethics behind it. So it would have just been nice if, like, ethically they were just like, look, we have to have the pubs open because we have to generate tax revenue from alcohol and it matters to the country. But that's not what it was. Instead, there was this weird focus on like Like it was just there was no integrity to it. It was just like we have to convince everybody to go out drinking, and there was no journalism behind it. Do you know what I mean? It was just like something that anybody on Facebook could have posted about how we should go out drinking.
Do you think there's an element of that though, where it is just about pleasing the masses? Let's get football out there. Let's get people in the pubs, and then they'll ignore everything else because they've got like the things that they really want in life. You know, it's like just a sort of arrogance of the government that we have at the moment, where I just give the players a bit of football and a couple of pints, and they'll leave us to it.
Do you not think it's going to like severely bite them when the inevitable happened, when we inevitably get a second wave, and we have to say, actually, all this stuff that we've given you again, we're going to have to take it back, unless they're so reckless that they do just subscribe to what companies has wanted all along, and we do herd immunity.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things when Jerry had asked you earlier on if you thought that it was like essentially money that was driving the idea to get the football back, my thought at the time was, is there a possibility that it's just normality? Like a football being back is such a base component of the British way of life, if you will, that like if football's not back on a Saturday, how could people possibly believe that that's what like that life is back to normal again? Do you know what I mean? So bringing it back to football, one of the things is obviously we've seen a club in England go under. Like, I mean, essentially that's the first fallout.
Well, went into administration.
Yeah. But I mean, like that for football teams, that's as close to going under as they'll ever get because of the weird way that banks lend money for assets. So you know what I mean, like in the grand scheme of things. But yeah, so like that's the idea that that's happened in England doesn't really bode well for many smaller teams in Scotland because, like essentially you have to go way down the chain of football teams before they're starting to make the same, or where they're starting to not make as much money. Like, I don't know how to put that, but essentially for them to be making as little money as a lot of the mid-tier teams in Scotland, you have to be way down that list of teams. Like,
yes and no, I would say, but like obviously we'll let Kieran answer this possibly. From my perspective, I kind of see it that the nature of English football, especially at the top level, means that if you do drop down or suddenly you can't earn the money that you were before. I mean, we've seen it with Leeds and Sunderland and various clubs that were playing in the Premiership that have dropped. And Wigan, it wasn't that long ago that Wigan were playing in the English Premiership. I do still think that pretty much every football club in Scotland's potentially in danger because of this, but I think the way that finances are stacked in England, I think they're potentially in more trouble the longer this goes on. But what's your opinion, Kieran?
I think the Wigan thing, it's a bit of an anomaly because it wasn't really related to COVID. It's because just coincidentally at this moment of time, they got some really dodgy owners in last month who basically shorted the entire club within a month. And there's some people within the EFL have, there's some allegations.
Just looking for a way to word this here.
Yeah,
allegedly.
There's some allegations about the people in Hong Kong made a bet that Wigan would get relegated. These owners came in the middle of Wigan going on a winning run, and they enter administration. So this could be something within a year's time where we're looking at people bought a football club to make sure it was relegated so their friends could win a bet.
Could be the biggest gambling scandal in sporting history, potentially.
Yeah, I think
also that might not be true. Let's just make sure we say that.
It's absolutely this allegedly. But I think with all of this, but in a way, I think that's more reflective of the state of English football than necessarily the COVID thing is. Like, this COVID thing is going to be very damaging for Scottish football. But English football is already in this precarious situation where, particularly in the Championship, the majority of Championship owners are batshit insane. Like, so much. You look at the way Championship, like I think it's Reading where their wage bill is more than double their annual revenue.
What?
And their wage bill alone is more than double the annual revenue. It's just, and I think there's 10 clubs. I could be wrong. I think there's 10 clubs where their wage bill is more than annual revenue. I mean, it's
So
because this is all
too big to fail type scenario. Is that like they're just lending for? Because I mean, obviously, I'm not a huge business head, but I've operated businesses quite for a wee while, and generally speaking, that's not a really good running model. Spending more money than you're making. Yeah.
It only works if you have somebody who's willing to pump their own savings into a club year on year, right?
Yeah, and that's the thing. This is why, this is one of the reasons you have to be batshit insane to be a football owner, is that you're almost certainly going to be making a significant loss. Like, why would you, unless you're either so narcissistic that you think you've got something that no other owner has, where you can magically propel the club into the Premier League, earn tens of millions, leave the club with a new training ground, Premier League stability, a statue with your name on it outside the new ground. But that's for 99.9% of owners. That's not how these things play out. You end up spending lots of money for mediocre players, and you're still in the Championship after losing tens of millions of pounds. This is a thing that happened with Bolton. It's happened with clubs like Sheffield Wednesday and Derby and so many. And you're starting to see the impact. That Bolton was saved by the skin of their teeth. Bury went out of business this year. I know you're saying, you're quite right that administration is the closest most clubs get to, but Bury's gone. Yeah. And I think this is going to be something that happens with increasing regularity over the next few years, just because there's the fit and proper owner test that's so unironically fit for purpose in itself, because they just keep letting these guys in. Still guys with white collar crimes are allowed to run a football club as long as the right kind of football white collar crimes. There's so many loopholes in it. It just
the Leeds owner specifically has he came from a background of having a whole heap of allegations of bad business against him, right? And still was able to walk in and take over at Leeds. And admittedly, it looks like it's going to work out for him as well.
I think the biggest one at the moment, the most timely one, is with Newcastle and these new Saudi owners who the deal was stalled a bit, but it's not for because of Saudi Arabia's human rights abuses. It's not because of the Khashoggi death or anything like that. It's because
or what they're doing in Yemen.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. It's nothing to do with that. It's because they have their broadcaster that broadcasts Premier League games is a play on beIN Sports. They've just ripped off the name of beIN Sports, and because beIN Sports is the largest Premier League broadcaster outside of the UK, they've taken umbrage with it. So it's a business reason. It has nothing to do with it's a sort of ethical responsibility for the Premier League. There's no sense of sort of moral intervention. It's a strategic business decision that this deal has stalled.
And it kind of brings us round full circle to hypocrisy and playing politics in football. The English Premiership are quite happy to put Black Lives Matter on the back of shirts at the moment, and in a performative sense, kind of play to the swell of public opinion at the moment. But they're also perfectly happy to go into business with, as you say, known human rights abusers across the board and allow them to buy into a big Premiership club. So, yeah, I mean, what do you think? What's your kind of take, and what do you think that the future holds for journalism in the UK and for yourself also? Where do you see yourself going? Is sports journalism your future now? Do you see yourself diversifying, maybe write a book, or where do you see things going?
I think an ideal thing, I love my job, so I'd like to stay with my job, but hopefully can get back into writing about music a bit more, because it's sort of fallen by the wayside. So then again, there's absolutely no one has a freelancer budget anywhere at the moment, so it's not like I can do any freelancing just now. I think the future of journalism itself is a bit. I don't know. Like it's very difficult not to be pessimistic, because you're already looking at a very limited jobs market where a lot of talented people have to freelance because they don't have any other option. Loads of like, I've got a friend who, like, an incredibly talented journalist, a really good writer and columnist as well. It's not just in terms of getting stories and writing features, just his prose is just phenomenal. He's, because he just, his regular stuff isn't doing anymore, so he's doing a coding course so he can try and do a bit of both, which is pretty cool. But it's, like, people, it's at the point.
Not everybody has that sort of ability to diversify in that sense, I suppose.
It's also the inverse, really, from what we spoke about at the start. Like, you can only get into journalism if you've got another job or something to support you. And now we're seeing an environment where you can only stay in journalism if you've got another job that can support you. Like,
yeah. And the thing is that it's the heritage thing as well, where, well, like, a lot of people who have been in their jobs for a very, very long time are hard to move, and that's fine. Like, loads of them very talented. It's very harsh to just say, right, you've been here for 20 years, you're off.
Do one, yeah.
But it's because, unlike more than most industries, people do stay in the same jobs and in the same companies for a very, very long time. It just makes it hard for other people to break into it, and especially journalism is especially not. I say this as a white guy of privilege. Like, it's a very hard thing for especially working class people of color to break into, and you see that especially, like, down in London and everything. You look at a lot of the broadsheets; they're still very, very white. And there's some phenomenal places doing stuff like that. So I think there'll be a real rise in good independent magazines, whether that's focused, like, there's this really great indie magazine focused on minority women called Galdem, who has become profitable very, very quickly. Like there was just this part-time thing a couple of women did for fun, and they've now got, like, loads of full-time staff, their own offices and everything. Another one is Tribune magazine. It was a resurrected socialist magazine that they now do. It's quarterly, but their big thing. You guys might have seen it online. They've got some really great writers now. They've basically come back as a point and say, okay, so the Guardian have neglected some areas of left-wing thought.
100%, yeah.
So we are going to try and address this. We're going to try and give a lot of the people they've disempowered a voice. And they've actually, speaking of the Tribune, have been really good in giving working class people of color regular columns, not just in terms of one-off commissions, but they've been really good in saying, we want you to represent us because you do represent us. So I do think the Athletic is its own thing, and I think subscriptions, whether that's for a physical magazine and online, or just online, I do feel it's the best way forward for decent journalism that we feel represents our values and challenges our values, and or in the course that's not really something applicable as much to football writing, but then something that's entertaining and informative in that regard. So it can, as you say, like, it's journalism as a wide array of things, so you can have it all covered. Yeah, I do think you just have to invest in, and I know we're approaching we're about to approach the worst recession in living memory, and people are already struggling. People have lost their jobs. People have been furloughed. But, well, I mean, I can't really say but to that. But except for this is the best thing that can happen to journalism. I know it might not be a realistic option given everything that's going to happen, but if it's the best way forward. Otherwise, everywhere else that you can't, ad revenues become become more and more constricted, it's going to become more reduced, and eventually we'll have nothing left apart from some freelancers earning 200 quid a month. So it's a bit of a cynical way to end it.
No. I mean, it's bleak, but it's real. Unfortunately, social media and the likes has given people the scenario where they want to have their media digital there in front of them. They want to have a website, but for that to happen, like, there's no one buying papers. Do you know what I mean? So, like, if you read all your articles online and you expect the articles to be there all the time, and you expect new articles all the time, but you expect all of this to happen for what is intrinsically free, because you're not paying for it. Like, you're not paying for anything for the website. So, you know what I mean? So, and then people don't want to pay for subscriptions. So it's like, as in, say, like the National or the Guardian or whatever, who offer various subscription models. Like, you don't want to allow ordination models. People don't want to do that, but they want these articles for free, but they want it there digitally, and they don't want to buy it in the paper, so there's no physical purchase. It's that weird dynamic that we now live in, where, like, well, why are you not just like fucking loving news and doing this for free? Like, why he's not?
Well, yeah, and I think you know, people, you can't both bemoan the standard of journalism that is being produced in the country and also refuse to fucking pay for it to improve. You know, you can't do both of those things. So if you are somebody who's sitting at home and are unhappy with the quality of journalism that is being produced, then, you know, try and get behind the publications that you do enjoy, and, you know, put some money into it and keep it going. Also, let's pick up on a couple of positive things you said. You know, you said that we're finishing on a negative, but was it Galdem? Was that the publication you mentioned? You know, the fact that they've been able to become profitable so quickly shows that there is a appetite for these things. You know, that if you hit the right niche and you provide the consumer with what it is that they're looking for, then, you know, they will buy into it and they will support it. And also, you know, something that has struck me from the way that you've spoken about the Athletic in particular tonight is it comes across from your body language and from the way that you've spoken, that it seems like it's a very positive workplace. It's like a very positive place for you to be on a daily basis. And I think that when, you know, people turn up to their work and they enjoy being there and they're in an environment which, you know, invigorates them and inspires them, then that's when good things happen, you know. So hopefully other employers and other publications can learn something from what I am sure and I hope will be a successful business and an outlet for a long time.
Oh, thank you. I've really enjoyed chatting to you guys.
Yeah, thanks for
Thanks very much.
It's much appreciated, mate. Cheers.